everybody. We're going to try this as a feedback pass. I'm going to go relatively quick through these, kind of hit you with the main notes, and then I'm going to go back and kind of show you some stuff in a couple of the files to show you how to kind of clear up some of these issues. So, Ryan, big issues I notice in yours, and this is kind of a consistent one I'm seeing in a lot of the animations, is sort of a little bit of a spacing issue as the character is landing. So we'll see in like a lot of these jumps, if the character starts up here, we have sort of this is the character's spacing at the top. It's kind of easing out of this. And it gets bigger. It goes a little bit bigger, but then instead of just hitting really hard like that, what it's actually doing is kind of slowing down here as it comes in, and then and so what that makes it feel like is like it's starting to defy gravity right before it hits the ground. That's almost always, pretty much is always, an issue with the curves. Your translate Y up and down is sort of easing in as it's landing here. So I'll kind of look at that here in a bit. I think you can also kind of loosen it up with a little bit of stuff. Your main motions are sort of these leans that you have, which I think is a rotation of the main controller, and a squash and stretch. I think just a little bit more of a sort of a bend forward or a bend from side to side. I would make these deformations feel like they're deforming in a slightly different direction instead of just straight up and down. So for example, on your jump here, he jumps, but when he stretches, he's stretching in this direction, like almost straight up and down, maybe even a little bit backwards. And I think what you could do instead is have the stretch kind of be leaning forward. Get your squash here. So I'm trying to draw the mouse. So your regular shape here, and then your stretches kind of following along the arc of the jump here. Does that make sense? So they're kind of angling along that arc, and I think that's an important thing to have in a lot of sort of these bouncy ball types of animations. So there's that, and then there's the spacing issue. I also feel like just a little bit the tail feels a little bit stiff. Like you maybe have put a little bit of timing differentials in the controllers. Like you've offset it a little bit, and the controllers of the tail, but it's still feeling kind of stiff. And I think you just have to build some of that overlapping action feeling into the pose. So there's that. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. Okay, Peter. So okay. I think you're actually getting some of the same issues with the sort of the spacing as he approaches the ground. Kind of feels like it eases into it a little bit, but your jumps are a little softer and a little slower, and I think that those could just be sped up a little bit. Like your timing just feels a little slow on the jumps. So just to pop that up. How I deal with timing is I usually make it faster until I feel like I've broken it, and then I pull back a little bit. So it's much more common that people have an issue with the timing feeling too slow than the timing feeling too fast. So you can kind of play around with that a little bit and speed it up. I also think that kind of have that same thing Ryan has going on in that sort of most of your deformation is just sort of straight up and down, not at any angle. And I think having a little bit of an angle and sort of the way your character jumps would really kind of benefit the way it feels a little bit. Okay, let's move on. So you kind of have a little bit of the opposite thing going on. Your character is jumping really fast. Maybe just a touch too fast. I don't know. I kind of like the poppy speed to it. I think you could sell it at that speed if you had a little bit more deformation in the character, a little bit more squash and stretch. And I think your squash and stretch is kind of straight up and down, whereas I think you could sort of lean it a little bit. You're not having this spacing issue on the ground. That's actually feeling pretty good. tail is feeling a touch stiff as well. So there's that. Otherwise, I think it's feeling pretty good. You're getting just a little bit of twinning on some of the antenna, and maybe that would just benefit from having slightly more unique poses on the antenna. Okay, Herschel. Okay, so you're getting some of the same issues that some of the others are getting. Is when the character comes in toward the ground, it kind of slows down and kind of slows out of that pose too. So you're kind of getting this ease in at the top, but you're also getting this ease in at the bottom. And so it kind of just feels like it's kind of riding on a wave, like a sine wave is just going up and down. And so again, we'll kind of look at that. And again, I think you could probably kind of angle your character a little bit more, but I think angling your character just a little bit in the jumps would really kind of help loosen it up a little bit, and also loosening the tail just a bit. Okay, let's look here. This one's actually pretty good. They're very subtle jumps. I think you get a little bit of twinning going on in here. Twinning meaning that both sides are kind of doing almost exactly the same thing. I think you could offset one. I think you could probably get a little bit more unique poses in here, especially the one that this ends on is kind of stiff. You see that they kind of flip and flop around in the same exact timing, and so I think that would really help a lot. I think your squash and stretch looks nice, and how much is deforming. And your squash or your stretch, I think, could happen a little bit earlier. Like you could already be stretching right as he's coming off the ground here. And I think the same as here. You're hitting on this stretch, and that looks good. But then it kind of hesitates before it squashes down for like 4 or 5 frames. I think having that squash a little bit earlier would really help. And I think also loosening up the tail just a little bit. I know a lot of people are going for sort of a more rigid tail, but I think kind of breaking the tail up a little bit more would really kind of help that and make it feel just a little bit looser. I get it, but it's feeling a little too stiff, as if we've just been scared to get it away from the bind pose, or the pose that was rigged in. Shinsen. Okay. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head on yours when you posted on Google+. You said that you thought the tail needed a little bit of cleanup in the arcs, and I agree, especially if we look at, so I can find that spot again here, right here on this landing. You just kind of see like stuff like this happening. Kind of hits in here and just kind of statics all around for a little bit. And so I think that it's really just kind of, it's less about having to actually clean it up too much and more about sort of like what the tail is doing during all of this. It just feels like it's happening. It feels like that ball at the end of the tail is just constantly in motion. If that makes sense. Actually, here's the spot I was looking for. It's right there. The tail. If we watch the tail just kind of, it comes in here, and if we frame by frame it through here as this character lands, it pops to there, and then it kind of pops back out, and just kind of zigzags all around and does some stuff. So I think just cleaning that up and simplifying it a little bit will just kind of take some of the static out of that motion. I think your deformations look pretty good. I think some of your staging could use some help, because you got a lot of these scenes where it kind of goes up out of the scene a little bit. And I think that you could just kind of play with your camera a little bit and get that a little tighter. Londra. So let's look at yours. I think overall your poses look good. What I think is missing on yours is sort of breaking up the timing a little bit. It kind of feels like you've gone through and posed everything together, and that's fine, but then it feels like everything is kind of hitting together too. Let me see if I can open this up in QuickTime and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So if we're scrubbing through, we'll see like these poses. It's like everything kind of has these keyframes that hit at the same time. So I know that that's likely a keyframe for you. And then everything kind of transitions together and stops at this keyframe too. And then everything sort of stops at this keyframe together, and everything sort of stops at this keyframe, and then so it's like all the keyframes I can just really see where they are, and everything sort of starts and stops at the same time. I think really you could kind of break up the timing, make sure everything kind of overlaps a little bit more, and that would really help. I also think that some of your jumps here, like this jump here, just kind of comes up off the ground, so I think that's where you need a squash and some stretch. You're getting your squash, you're kind of needing the stretch before it. And so this one maybe doesn't need it quite as bad because you're kind of just going from a normal shape to a squash. But I think you're kind of missing some of the stretches here, and so some of these early jumps aren't quite feeling like they have the energy to them. So I think overlapping that, overlapping your poses a little bit to where you get a little bit more of a fluidity to the pieces moving and not all starting and stopping at the same time, and really kind of pushing some of your squash and stretch stuff. And I think also somebody pointed out that the antenna don't really move very much after he jumps over the box. So that's just kind of a, I think you got a really good start on this, but it does need a little bit of polish to kind of make it kind of feel like it's not just your key poses, you got some overlapping action going on there too. Rachel. This actually looks really good. I have a couple little nitpicky things. The one that strikes me the most is kind of how the character squashes when it lands. So it actually does a really nice job on the jump, but when it, well, I don't know, it kind of comes up off the ground without stretching there, so you probably need like a stretch to like push it up off the ground. You got this stretch here, but then when it hits the ground, it takes it a while to sort of squash down. So I think that like you're kind of having that same issue that we saw earlier with somebody, I don't remember specifically who, that when you hit the ground, like your body's going to compress relatively quickly, and I think it just takes too many frames. It's almost like it's got a hesitation before it squashes of a few frames, and so we really need to kind of make that squash happen just a little bit earlier, so it feels like a result from this. I think your tail actually looks really good, though. The tail animation's looking really nice. I think you could probably do a little bit with offsetting some of these antennae, maybe making them not hitting at the exact same time. They got some good overlap in them, but both of them are kind of doing the same thing. But otherwise, that one's looking pretty good. Okay, this is Kalen. I think that you. Let me see. I don't think you're having quite the spacing issue with the landing. I think you can angle your poses a little bit more. It still feels like it's squashing straight up and down, and you're getting shots like this where you're kind of losing your framing. And I think you and Alondra kind of have that same thing going on, and like a lot of stuff is starting and stopping at the same time. So it may actually just be like you're, I don't know, you kind of play around with like the. I think it's just the body just feels a little stiff in the way it moves. This would help too to have like a stretch right before the character hits the ground. Um, but I don't know. We can kind of look at that, but I feel like it needs a little bit of loosening up, and it still feels like everything's kind of starting and stopping at the same time to me as well. So okay, I think I'm actually running out of time on this video. There's a limit of 15 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and stop on this one. I'll wrap up the last 3 or 4 and then do a little demo